Chapter 1. The Wrong Floor. Ethan had always been a skeptic. He didn't believe in ghosts, conspiracy theories, or urban legends. But that was before he pressed the wrong combination of buttons in the elevator. It happened late at night, in his apartment building. He had just come back from work, exhausted and barely paying attention. He stepped inside the elevator and, without thinking, pressed a sequence of buttons, 426301, before realizing that some of those floors didn't even exist in his building. The elevator shuddered, the lights flickered. For a brief moment, Ethan felt something shift around him, as if the air had thickened. Then, the doors opened. Everything looked the same. The same hallway, the same beige walls. But something felt off. Ethan stepped out cautiously. The corridor was too quiet. He could hear his own breathing, his own heartbeat, but nothing else. Not a single sound from the other apartments. That's when he saw it. His own photograph was hanging on the wall. Not just one, hundreds of them, everywhere. His heart pounded as he approached one. It was him, but he didn't recognize the photo. When was this taken? He reached out to touch it, and as soon as his fingers brushed the surface, a whisper. "You finally made it back." Ethan spun around. But the hallway was empty. That's when the elevator doors behind him slammed shut, and the button panel inside had no numbers anymore. Chapter 2. The silent apartment. Ethan's mind raced. This had to be a prank. Some kind of elaborate joke. Maybe he was just hallucinating from exhaustion. He turned toward his apartment, 301, and saw that the door was slightly open. Cautiously, he stepped inside. Everything looked exactly the same as his apartment. His couch, his TV, his books, even the dirty dishes in the sink. But something was wrong. The air smelled stale, like the place hadn't been lived in for years. Then he saw the notes. Sticky notes, scattered all over his desk. All written in his handwriting. "Do not go to sleep. They are watching. Find the exit before midnight. Do not look at your reflection." Ethan's stomach turned. This was insane. He didn't write these. He couldn't have. Then he saw his laptop screen was on. There was a video playing. It was footage of him. He was sitting at this very desk, whispering to the camera, his face pale and gaunt. "If you're watching this, that means I didn't make it out. You need to listen to me. There's a way back. But you have to hurry, before they find you." A shadow moved behind the Ethan in the video, and then the screen glitched, and the video cut to a live feed. A feed of Ethan, right now, sitting at his desk, and behind him. Something moved. Chapter 3. The thing in the mirror. Ethan whipped around. Nothing. The room was empty, but his skin crawled with an overwhelming feeling of being watched. That's when he saw the bathroom mirror. His reflection wasn't moving. He lifted his hand. The reflection didn't. Then it smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't his reflection. It slowly raised its hand and pressed a single finger against its lips. Shh. Chapter 4. The other Ethan stumbled backward, his breath quick and shallow. The room was plunged into darkness, but he could still feel the thing in the mirror watching him. His fingers fumbled against the desk, searching for his phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. His heart pounded like a drum in his ears. Then, tap, tap, tap. A sound. Coming from the mirror. Ethan swallowed hard and forced himself to look. The reflection was still smiling. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, bones cracking like dry branches. And then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped forward, out of the mirror. Ethan bolted for the door. Locked. He spun back just in time to see the other Ethan, or whatever it was, standing in the middle of the room. It had his face, his clothes, but its eyes were black. "You took too long," it whispered. Ethan's breath hitched. "It's my turn now." And then it lunged. The lights went out. Chapter 7. The timer chime echoed through the room. Ethan spun around. In the middle of the space stood an old grandfather clock, its hands moving backward. A timer. Tick, tick, tick. "When it reaches midnight, you'll belong to this place too," the child said. Ethan's mind raced. There had to be a way out. The elevator. If he could find it again, maybe he could reverse what he did. He turned back to the child. "Where's the elevator?" The child shook his head. "It finds you." Ethan's stomach twisted. No, there had to be a way. He turned, scanning the room. Then, he saw it. A single elevator door at the far end of the room. But something was standing in front of it, waiting, smiling. The other Ethan. Chapter 8. The elevator that shouldn't exist, Ethan's pulse hammered as he locked eyes with the other Ethan. It was still smiling. Too wide, too unnatural. The elevator was right there, only a few steps away. But something in his gut told him that if he ran straight for it, he wouldn't make it. The other Ethan knew what he was thinking. "You don't belong here," it whispered, tilting its head. "But neither do I." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" The other Ethan's grin faltered, just for a second, and in that second, Ethan ran, straight for the elevator. The other Ethan moved fast, a blur of twisted limbs, an unnatural speed. Ethan lunged forward, shoving past it, fingers slamming against the elevator button. Ding. The door slid open. Inside was pure darkness. No lights, no buttons, no floor. Just an endless black void. Ethan hesitated. A mistake. Other Ethan grabbed his wrist. Chapter 9. The exchange, Ethan fought back, yanking his arm free. But the other Ethan didn't let go. Its grip tightened like a vice, its fingers unnaturally cold. "You don't understand," it hissed. "You pressed the buttons. You opened the door. Now someone has to stay." Ethan's heart pounded. He could hear the clock ticking behind him. Almost midnight. "Then you stay," Ethan growled. The other Ethan's expression twisted. "I already did." Ethan barely had time to process those words before the elevator pulled him inside. The doors slammed shut, and the world vanished. Chapter 10. The Void. Between worlds, Ethan wasn't falling, he was floating. The void inside the elevator wasn't just darkness. It was something else entirely. It felt alive, watching. And then, whispers. Not just one voice, hundreds. "You don't belong here. You took the wrong path. It's too late. The door is closing." Ethan's breath came, in shallow gasps. What door? Then he saw it. A single flickering red exit sign in the distance. He swam through the blackness, pushing toward it, but the whispers grew angrier. "You can't leave. You brought this upon yourself. Give us someone else." Hands emerged, from the darkness, grasping at his legs, his arms, his throat. They were trying to pull him under. Ethan kicked, thrashed, fought. The exit was so close. Then a voice, a single, clear voice, cut through the whispers. "Wake up." And suddenly, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open, and Ethan was home. Chapter 11. The return Ethan stumbled out into the familiar hallway of his apartment building. The real one. Everything was exactly as he left it. The same lighting, the same faint smell of old carpet, the same quiet hum of the city outside. His heart still pounded in his chest. Had it all been a dream? He turned to look at the elevator panel. The buttons were normal again. No strange numbers, no glitches. Just a normal elevator. His fingers hovered over the buttons. He hesitated. Then, the elevator doors slid shut on their own, and he swore. For just a split second, he saw a pair of black eyes staring at him from the reflection. He backed away slowly, heart hammering. That's when he noticed something on his door, a single sticky note, his own handwriting. It read, "Don't press the buttons again." Chapter 12. But it wasn't over. For days, Ethan tried to forget, tried to convince himself it was just a hallucination, lack of sleep, a vivid nightmare. Anything but what he knew was real. But then, the messages started, texts from an unknown number. "You left me behind. You weren't supposed to escape. You owe us someone else." And the worst one, a video attachment. His stomach twisted as he pressed play. It was footage of his own apartment, recorded from the inside, and in the video, lying in his own bed, was himself, sleeping. But Ethan wasn't asleep. He was awake, watching. A cold shiver ran down his spine. His phone buzzed. One last text. Check the mirror. Ethan turned. His reflection wasn't moving. And then, it smiled. Chapter 13. Nowhere to run. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His reflection was smiling, but he wasn't. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. His pulse pounded so loudly he could barely think. This wasn't over. He had escaped the elevator, but something had followed him back. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Unknown number. "Let me in." A sharp knock at the door. Ethan's stomach twisted. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward. His fingers trembled as he reached for the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He exhaled shakily, stepping back. Then, bang, bang, bang. The knocks were louder this time, more forceful. His phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. I know you're in there, Ethan." His blood ran cold. His name. They knew his name. Chapter 14. The second note. Ethan's hands shook as he grabbed the sticky note from his door. "Don't press the buttons again." He flipped it over. There was something on the back, a second message, scrawled in the same handwriting. His handwriting. "But if you do, don't go alone." A chill ran down his spine. What did that mean? Had he written this? When? He didn't remember writing it. Another knock at the door. Softer this time. Then, something worse. A whisper. From the other side of the door. "Ethan, let me in." He froze. The voice sounded like his own. Chapter 15. The call from nowhere. Ethan backed away from the door, his breath quick and shallow. His phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. Pick up." A second later, his phone started ringing. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" His voice was barely above a whisper. At first, silence. Then, the same voice as before. His own voice. "Why did you leave me?" Ethan's knees nearly buckled. "You weren't supposed to leave." He opened his mouth to respond, but something clicked. His bedroom mirror cracked, a single jagged line down the center. The call ended. And then, without warning, his reflection moved on its own. Chapter 16. The man in the mirror, Ethan's reflection, stepped forward. His real body was frozen in place, but the Ethan in the mirror moved closer, 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 until it pressed a hand against the glass. Ethan's breath hitched. His chest felt tight, suffocated. The reflection's smile returned, and then it whispered, "Trade places with me." Ethan stumbled backward, The reflection's hand pushed harder. The crack in the mirror spread. Suddenly, the lights in the apartment flickered. Then, the reflection reached through. Chapter 17. Now You See Me. A cold, unnatural hand gripped Ethan's wrist. The glass didn't shatter. It bent, warping like a liquid surface as his reflection pulled. No. Ethan yanked back, fighting the pull. But the reflection was stronger. It smiled wider, its black eyes gleaming. It's time. Ethan's feet slid forward against his will, his body tilted toward the mirror. He screamed. And then, a loud chime. The clock. Midnight. The mirror shattered. Ethan hit the floor. The apartment was silent. He gasped for breath, his heart pounding, out of control. Slowly, he looked up. The mirror was broken. His reflection was gone. And then, a whisper right behind him. See you soon. Chapter 18. One last message. Ethan didn't sleep that night, or the next night, or the one after that. The texts had stopped, the calls had stopped, but the fear hadn't. Every time he passed a mirror, he felt it. A presence. Watching, waiting, and then a week later, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Look in the elevator. Ethan's stomach dropped. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped into the hallway. The elevator doors were already open. Inside, a single sticky note, in his handwriting. It read, "You never really left." The doors slammed shut, and the elevator went down, to a floor that didn't exist. Chapter 19. The floor that shouldn't exist. The elevator descended. Ethan's stomach twisted as the floor numbers blinked past. A7. The air grew heavy, thick, like the pressure of deep ocean water. 9. Then suddenly, no numbers at all, just a single symbol. A low hum vibrated through the walls. The lights flickered. Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. Then, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open, and beyond them, nothing. A vast, endless black void. And then, a hand reached out from the darkness. Long, pale fingers, stretching forward, reaching for him. Chapter 20. The voice in the dark. Ethan staggered backward, slamming against the elevator wall. The hand twitched. Then, a voice. "You left me behind." Ethan's blood ran cold. It was his own voice, coming from the void. Another hand emerged. Then a face. His face. Pale, distorted, its empty black eyes locked onto him. "You took my place." The thing dragged itself closer. Its body unnatural, stretched, wrong. Ethan's chest tightened. He slammed his fists against the elevator buttons. Nothing worked. The thing crawled forward, its hands reaching. Then, suddenly, ding! The elevator shot upward. The doors slammed shut, and Ethan was rising. Chapter 21. The other Ethan. The elevator rocketed up, faster than normal, too fast. Ethan clutched the handrail, his heart pounding. The screen flickered. The numbers returned. Then, something whispered behind him. "You're not supposed to be here." Ethan turned slowly. His own reflection stared back at him, not in the mirror, in the elevator wall. It smiled, and then it stepped out. Chapter 22. Run. Ethan lunged forward, slamming the emergency button. The lights exploded. Glass shattered. The elevator lurched. His reflection. No, the other Ethan. Twisted unnaturally, its limbs bending the wrong way. This is my turn now. Its hand shot forward. Ethan ducked, rolled. The other Ethan lunged again. The walls cracked open. A deafening screech filled the air. And then, the elevator crashed. Chapter 23. Wake up pain. Ethan groaned, blinking against the blinding white light. His head throbbed. His body ached. He was lying on a cold floor. The elevator doors were open. Slowly, he sat up. He wasn't in his building anymore. The hall stretched out before him, identical to his apartment hallway. But something was wrong. All the doors were open, and inside each apartment, there were mirrors, dozens of them. And in every single reflection, his own face was smiling. But he wasn't. Then, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Welcome home. Chapter 24. The new reality Ethan's pulse hammered. He stepped forward, cautiously peering into one of the apartments. Everything inside looked normal, except for the mirrors. Each one warped, twisted, wrong, and then, one by one, his reflections started turning their heads toward him. They weren't mirroring his movements. They were watching him, grinning. Ethan spun around, but the hallway was gone. Behind him was only mirrors, stretching endlessly, and in each reflection, his own twisted copies stepped forward. He was surrounded. No escape. And then, all at once, they reached for him. Chapter 25. No exit. Ethan screamed. 1,000 hands grabbed at him, pulling, twisting, dragging him into the glass. The mirrors shattered. Darkness swallowed him whole. He fell. Deeper. 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 Until everything stopped. Ethan opened his eyes. He was in his apartment. The morning sun filtered through the curtains. His alarm clock buzzed. A dream? Had it all been? His phone buzzed. A sticky note was pressed to the screen, in his handwriting. Don't look in the mirror. Ethan's heart stopped. Then, from across the room, his mirror moved, and something inside smiled. Chapter 26. The reflection that wasn't his. Ethan froze. His reflection blinked, but Ethan hadn't. A slow, creeping grin stretched across the reflection's face. Not his face. The thing in the mirror took a step forward, but Ethan hadn't moved. His stomach twisted. He grabbed the sticky note from his phone, his own handwriting. Don't look in the mirror. Too late. The mirror shuddered. The glass rippled like water. Then, the reflection stepped out, into his room, and Ethan finally understood. He wasn't in his world anymore, and now, something else was. Chapter 27. Trapped in the glass, Ethan stumbled back. The thing wearing his face tilted its head, watching him, studying him. Its movements were too smooth, too calculated, and then it spoke. In his voice. Finally. Ethan's breath hitched. The thing smiled wider. You don't belong here. The air crackled. The room seemed to bend, distort. And then Ethan felt it. A cold pull, a force dragging him back, into the mirror. He clawed at the floor, heart pounding. The glass opened up beneath him, swallowing him whole. And the last thing he saw was himself, standing, in his room, smiling, closing the mirror behind him. Chapter 28. The world behind the glass. Ethan hit the ground hard. He gasped, rolling onto his back. But the floor was wrong. It was smooth, reflective, like glass. He sat up, and his stomach dropped. He was in an exact replica of his apartment. But everything shimmered, like he was inside a giant mirror. Ethan scrambled to his feet, ran to the window, but there was nothing outside, just an endless black void. He spun around, searching for a way out, and that's when he saw it, the mirrors lining the walls, and inside them, he saw his real apartment and his reflection. No, the thing that stole his life, living in it. And then, The thing turned, looked right at him, and whispered, "Enjoy your new home." Chapter 29. No way back, Ethan pounded on the glass. "Let me out." The thing on the other side just laughed. Then, it reached for Ethan's phone, his phone, and started texting. Ethan's stomach dropped. It was texting. His friends, his family, living his life, and Ethan was trapped, alone, in the world behind the mirror. Chapter 30. The other's Ethan's breath came fast, shaky. He turned, scanning the impossible space. Then, a sound, soft, whispering, from the shadows. His body locked. Up. He wasn't alone. Something was in here with him. Something else that had been trapped. For a very, very long time. And then, out of the darkness, they started crawling toward him, to be continued. Chapter 31. The lost ones, Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. The figures in the darkness moved closer, crawling, shuffling, their limbs bending wrong, their faces blurry, distorted, like reflections on shattered glass. Ethan staggered back, his breath sharp, trapped. One of the figures spoke, a broken, echoing whisper. New one. Ethan's stomach twisted. Another voice, closer. How long has it been? The figures pressed in, dozens of them, their hands reaching, their fingers cold, like glass. And Ethan realized they weren't just trapped. They had been here for years, decades, centuries, prisoners of the mirror, just like him. And now, they wanted to make him one of them. Chapter 32. The escape attempt. Ethan turned and ran. His feet slammed against the cold, glass-like ground. Behind him, the lost ones whispered, screamed, and then they chased him, their footsteps silent. Ethan dodged around endless, twisting corridors of reflections. Everywhere he turned, more mirrors, more versions of his apartment, more copies of himself, laughing, smiling, watching him. "No way out," they whispered. "No way out." Ethan's breath hitched. There had to be a way. There had to be. And then, he saw it. At the end of the corridor, a single cracked mirror, the only one that was broken, and beyond it, a door. Chapter 33. The shattered path. Ethan's legs burned. He lunged toward the broken mirror, but then, the glass beneath him rippled, like water, and suddenly, he was sinking. The reflections moved, grabbing at his arms, pulling him down. "Stay. Stay with us." Ethan kicked, fought, and then, his hand closed around a shard of glass. With everything he had, he slashed it through the air. The reflections screamed. The world shattered, and Ethan fell forward, straight through the broken mirror. Chapter 34. Back to reality? Ethan gasped. The air was cold. Real. He scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering. He was in his apartment, his real apartment. No mirrors, no whispers, just silence. He exhaled. It was over. Right? Then, a soft buzz, his phone, a text message. Unknown number. Check the mirror. Ethan's blood froze. He turned. His bedroom mirror had a crack in it, and inside, a shape was moving. A hand pressed against the glass. Smiling. Waiting. Still there. Chapter. The cracks are spreading. Ethan's breath hitched. The crack in the mirror spread. Thin, jagged lines splintering outward. The shape inside wasn't moving anymore, just standing, watching, smiling. Then, a soft tapping from the inside. Ethan staggered back, his body cold. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You didn't escape. His stomach twisted. His fingers hovered over the screen, shaking. Then, Another buzz, another message, this one worse. Unknown number. Look outside. Ethan's heart pounded. He turned, walked to the window, and his breath caught. The city outside was wrong. The buildings shimmered, the streetlights flickered. Like reflections, and the people, their faces were blurred, like the lost ones, like him. And then he understood. He hadn't escaped. He was still inside, still in the mirror world, and the real world was gone, or maybe he was. Chapter 36. The other Ethan's body locked up. No. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. He spun toward the mirror. The other him was still there, still smiling, still tapping on the glass. And then, it whispered, "Let me out." Ethan stumbled back, shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You took my life. You left me in here." The thing inside the mirror tilted its head, and then it laughed. "No, Ethan. You took mine." Chapter 37. Which one is real? The walls wobbled. The air rippled. Ethan clutched his head. His thoughts, fracturing. Which one was real? Him or the thing in the mirror? Was he the one who escaped, or was he still trapped? The world tilted. The mirror shuddered, and then a new message appeared on his phone, not from an unknown number, from his own. "Ethan, wake up." And then everything shattered. Chapter 38. The final truth. Ethan gasped. Cold air rushed into his lungs. He sat up. He was in his bed, his real bed. Sunlight poured through the window. No mirrors, no cracks, no whispers, just silence. He grabbed his phone. No strange messages. No missed calls. Nothing. His hands shook. Had it all been a dream? Had he imagined everything? Then, his stomach twisted, because on his bedside table, there was a sticky note, a single message, in his own handwriting. "Don't look in the mirror." Chapter 39. The reflection. Never lies, Ethan's hands trembled as he picked up the note, his own handwriting, but he didn't remember writing it. His pulse thundered in his ears. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned his head toward the bathroom. The door was slightly open. The mirror inside was hidden in the shadows. But he knew. He felt it. Something was waiting, watching. Then, a soft creak. The bathroom door moved, just an inch. Ethan's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. Chapter 40. The whisper. Behind the glass, Ethan froze. He wanted to run, wanted to pretend none of this was happening, but he had to know, had to be sure. With slow, shaking steps, he approached the bathroom. The door groaned as he pushed it open. His own reflection stared back. Normal. Too normal. Ethan swallowed hard. "No," he whispered. "I know you're there." For a long moment, silence. Then, his reflection smiled, but Ethan didn't. And then it spoke. "You should have stayed in the mirror." Chapter 41. The switch. Ethan's chest tightened. His reflection tilted its head, grinning. "It's funny," it whispered. "You still think you're the real one." Ethan staggered back. His mind reeled. No. He had escaped, hadn't he? The reflection raised a hand, pressed it against the glass. The mirror rippled, and suddenly, Ethan's feet felt heavy, like he was sinking, like the world was slipping away. And then, his reflection stepped forward, out of the glass, and Ethan was pulled in. Chapter 42. The Mirror World. Reclaims, Ethan screamed. His hands slammed against the cold glass. His own face stared back at him. Not his, the other one. Smiling, laughing. "Don't worry," it whispered. "I'll live your life. Better than you ever did." "And Ethan." Ethan pounded on the glass. Begged, but the mirror held him tight. And outside, the other Ethan walked away, leaving him behind. Forever. Chapter 43. Trapped time, lost meaning. The mirror world was silent. Empty. Ethan screamed until his voice broke. Nobody heard. Nobody would ever hear. And outside, his reflection lived his life, his job, his friends, his face. Nobody knew the difference. Nobody noticed he was gone, except for one person. Someone who had seen this before. Someone who knew. And on the other side of the glass, a new message appeared on Ethan's phone. From an unknown number. "I can help you, but you have to hurry." Ethan's hope ignited, his only chance. And then, a new whisper in the darkness. "Not this time."